Good morning. My name is Trimble Gilbert. I'm from Arctic Village. I'm the second traditional chief, or Tanana chief. I'd like to welcome each one of you to our beautiful country's state of Alaska. I dream about this year to do this. I don't even know what's going to happen, but I'm here to see all the leaders from our countries. We are the native people of Alaska, Athabascan, and our brother and sister along the coast. We've been here thousands of years. We survived during the cold weathers. When I grew up, weather is really different than today, but 70 below. But our people survive. We are the indigenous people. And we still carry on with our cultures. And we, for the next generation to come, and we fighting for our countries and what we have, what resource we have in our countries to survive traditional foods. And you could see the Yukon rivers. It's a huge river. We've been fishing thousands of years, and we've been hunting thousands of years in Alaska. So all we care about now is for the next generations to come. We have a lot of young people behind us now in the state of Alaska. So now is the time for me to say a few words about this, our culture's traditional way of life. It's not easy many years ago. Now things are getting better for us to live better life in Alaska, but we got to have our own food to survive for the next future generations to come. So we know that. I keep saying that when I make speech. I keep telling the leader, our leader everywhere, keep fire going. There's a lot of teachings about our history during the hard time, but we survived. So there's a lot of things, important things to teach for the next generations to come to survive. So we are here to say something about ourselves. And you are very welcome to Alaska. I hope you enjoyed everything with us today to Fairbanks, city of Fairbanks. Thank you very much. Masicho.
the Arctic. Nowhere else in the world can you find such pristine and timeless natural beauty. Yet also find communities that have thrived here for millennia, despite the challenges of living in the extreme north. And nowhere else are ecological changes so drastically altering every aspect of life. The enormous changes taking place in the Arctic are uncovering more risks and opportunities than ever before. With the livelihoods of Arctic communities and the wider economic interests of 8 nations so closely linked with changes taking place, now, more than ever, international cooperation is critical. For 20 years, the Arctic Council has filled that role, serving as the place where Arctic nations come together to collaborate to protect the Arctic's natural treasures while utilizing its commercial value in responsible and sustainable ways. Over the past 2 years, during the U.S. chairmanship, the Arctic Council and its partners have taken important steps to bolster the safety, security, and stewardship of the Arctic Ocean, improve economic and living conditions of Arctic communities by supporting initiatives to enhance connectivity, access to energy, and infrastructure, address the impacts of climate change, and facilitate the international Arctic science research so vital to addressing the many changes transforming the Arctic today. Nowhere else in the world is international cooperation so critical to creating resiliency in the face of ecological change. And nowhere else is this cooperation occurring with all parties given equal voice than the Arctic Council. As the U.S. chairmanship of the Arctic Council comes to a close, we thank you for traveling to the great state of Alaska, home of America's Arctic, so that the Arctic Council can continue to contribute to a peaceful and healthy Arctic for the next 20 years and beyond.
Well, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you foreign ministers, permanent participant heads of delegation, Arctic Council observers, and honored guests. And I want to thank again the tribal leaders of the Aboriginal groups for their greeting this morning and their very meaningful message to all of us, and we appreciate their opening this session for us. I want to welcome all of you to the 10th Arctic Council Ministerial meeting in this beautiful city of Fairbanks, and we thank them again for their great hospitality in hosting us. I would now call your attention to the provisional agenda for this meeting and seek its adoption. As I see no delegates seeking the floor, I take it that the agenda can be adopted without change. It is so decided. As the next agenda point, I would like to call for the adoption of the SAO report to ministers. As I see no delegations seeking the floor, I take it that the report can be adopted without change. It is so decided. Let's turn to the agenda item on the accomplishments of the Arctic Council during the U.S. chairmanship. The United States has been privileged to lead the Arctic Council at a time when the Arctic region has been facing unprecedented change and challenges. I am grateful for the level of cooperation that the nations and the peoples of the Arctic have demonstrated as they continue to address these challenges. The Arctic Council, which recently celebrated its 20th anniversary, has proven to be an indispensable forum in which we can pursue cooperation. I want to affirm that the United States will continue to be an active member in this Council. The opportunity to chair the Council has only strengthened our commitment to continuing its work in the future. We look forward to working with Finland as they assume the leadership role of this Council. there are still issues of great concern to each of us that we can address, including advancing the welfare and living conditions of those who call the Arctic home, recognizing that each country has a strategic interest in being part of the Arctic's future, and making sure that we continue to be vigilant in protecting the fragile environment. In the United States, we are currently reviewing several important policies, including how the Trump administration will approach the issue of climate change. We are appreciative that each of you has an important point of view, and you should know that we are taking the time to understand your concerns. We're not going to rush to make a decision. We're going to work to make the right decision for the United States. The Arctic Council will continue to be an important platform as we deliberate on these issues. I cannot hope to mention all of the individual initiatives and programs that the Council has brought to fruition over the past 2 years under U.S. chairmanship. Each of the Council's subsidiary bodies has done outstanding work in this respect, and I do wish to acknowledge and commend all of their efforts, even as I highlight but a few. The signing of the Agreement on Enhancing International Arctic Scientific Cooperation will facilitate the movement of scientists, scientific equipment, and importantly, data sharing across the international boundaries of the Arctic. The Council has produced the first ever assessment of telecommunications infrastructure in the Arctic. During the Finnish chairmanship, the Arctic Council will build on this work in conjunction with the private sector to advance this ongoing effort to strengthen connectivity throughout the Arctic region. Arctic Council members have conducted multiple exercises to prepare for potential search and rescue events in the Arctic, as well as to coordinate responses to environmental incidents. These exercises significantly advanced our capacity to address risk inherent in the increased human activity that is undergoing and will continue to expand in the Arctic region. At the community level, the Council broke new ground in a number of ways. A compelling initiative known as Rising Sun has produced resources that will prove truly valuable to Arctic residents in addressing suicide prevention, particularly among indigenous youth. The Council also built on work initiated by the state of Alaska to improve water and sanitation capacity in rural Arctic communities. As Arctic shipping continues to increase, the Council took a number of measures designed to ensure that such shipping remains safe and reliable, including the Arctic Ship Traffic Database that will improve our understanding of the ship traffic in the Arctic, including the number and types of vessels in the Arctic, their exact routing, and other important information. And finally, the Council has strengthened resilience at the national and local levels in the face of environmental and other change. I could go on at length about our shared accomplishment, but I am certain other speakers today will mention the many other Arctic Council projects deserving of recognition. Let me close my remarks by thanking again all of those involved in these initiatives, the many government officials, the permanent participants, the working group and task force chairs, the secretariats, the observers, and invited experts. The last 2 years have witnessed remarkable growth in the reach and productivity of the Arctic Council, thanks to all of you. And I'm confident that under the leadership of Finland, the Council is poised to do even more. With that, we're ready to move to the next agenda item, which is the statements from the Arctic states and from the permanent participants. I now offer the floor to each of the other heads of delegation in turn for these statements, beginning with Canada.
Well, thank you very much for that, Rex. Normally, it's a pleasure for Canadians to speak, to do anything in a hockey rink. But I have to say, it feels like you're rubbing it in today, because the Oilers suffered a terrible defeat last night. And I know Chief Bill Erasmus shares with me the pain that Oilers fans are feeling. С самого начала Рекс у нас здесь хозяин, но мы в Северной Америке находимся на моем континенте. И с самого начала я хотела приветствовать наших российских соседов, особенно коренных народов.
Specifically, neighboring the indigenous people. They're neighbors, but on certain issues we have different points of view, and as always in the Arctic Council we have been able and will be able to discuss and address our joint issues in the north. I'm very happy to see you here.
The Arctic Council is so valuable for all of us and very much for Canada. It's a place where we, the Arctic nations, can set aside issues outside the Arctic and really appreciate that we have the real honor of shared stewardship of this incredibly beautiful, incredibly precious region. And I think that it's a real honor for Canada to be here and to be part of this conversation. I'm grateful to our American hosts for starting the conversation today with a very moving statement and dance and singing from the Indigenous people here. 50% of the population of the Canadian Arctic is Indigenous people, and that is a very important focus for us in the Arctic. And I do want to say, especially to the Canadian Indigenous representatives here, an absolute priority of our government, as our Prime Minister says, is our relationship with the Indigenous people of Canada. We have done some terrible things in the past, and a priority for us is to have truth, reconciliation, and to build a strong nation-to-nation relationship. The conversation around this table with representatives of Indigenous people here with a seat at the table with us is a really important part of that, and I'm glad that we're able to do that together. I was really glad, Rex, that you mentioned the Rising Sun effort. We had a workshop in Iqaluit a few months ago. It's a very painful issue in Canada right now, and I think anything that we can do together on the suicide and mental well-being, especially in Indigenous communities, is really, really important. You will see when you talk to Okalik, who is the chair of the Inuit Circumpolar Council, she's wearing a beautiful fur collar. And something very important for Canada and for our Indigenous people is trade in Indigenous products. That's part of the life on the land that we heard about, and I think that's a good priority for us to be sharing here. The environment is so important for all of us. I do want to thank the United States and all of our officials. I think that we came to a really good place in our statement, and I think that says something really important to the world. I'm really, really proud of that and glad that we got there. And I know that that took some effort to get there, so thank you very much. And then just finally, in conclusion, something we had last week in Ottawa, I hosted a lunch for all our Arctic ambassadors. And the Russian ambassador to Canada made a great point. He said the Arctic isn't just a place on the map. For all of our countries, it's a home. And it's a beautiful home. It's a home that's an important resource for the planet. It's also a home where people need to earn a living. And one of the things that I hope that we can all work on is innovation, economic growth. We're jealous of our Norwegian colleagues who talk about having stronger growth north of the Arctic Circle than south. I think there's a lot we can learn from it. As Rex pointed out, we have a science agreement we've all signed. I think data-based policy is very important and really promising, and it's a place we can collaborate together. So thank you very much. Thanks to the American hosts for your hard work. Looking forward to working with Finland. Je veux vous remercier pour votre travail. Et ce sera un très grand plaisir pour le Canada de travailler avec le Finlande. Merci.
We'll move to the Kingdom of Denmark. Thank you.
Thank you, and dear all. On behalf of the Kingdom of Denmark, I would like to start by thanking the USA for the good cooperation during your chairmanship the last 2 years, and congratulate the upcoming Finnish chairmanship. Before passing the floor to Greenland and the Faroe Islands, I would like to remind us all that our cooperation in the Arctic Council truly is a success story. During more than 20 years of existence, the Council has manifested itself as a strong framework for peaceful cooperation. It has also proven its ability to adapt to changing circumstances and has successfully transformed into an important decision-making forum. Today's signing of the third legally binding agreement is a clear evidence of this transformation. With these words, I would like to pass on the floor to Minister of Independence, Foreign Affairs and Agriculture from Greenland, Ms. Suka Frederiksen, and then the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade of the Faroe Islands, Mr. Paul Mikkelsen. Please.
Thank you. Colleagues, permanent participants and leaders, ladies and gentlemen, with the increasing interest for the Arctic, our cooperation becomes even more important. We hear many different visions about how the Arctic should develop, be protected and used. Yet, what I often think is lacking are the Arctic people's voice and influence. The outside world often forgets that people living in the Arctic have their own vision on which opportunity to seize and which challenge to solve. It is important to find a way that offers the prospect for economic development that embraces and respects our way of living. Therefore, it is our most prominent task, us who call the Arctic our home, to lead the dialogue on and development of our region. In Greenland, we are aware of our responsibility to secure a sustainable development to the benefit of our country. We need to adapt to a change in climate and change in our way of living. This cooperation shall secure a sustainable future and be based on common values and respect. Rønner, thank you.
As an island nation, the Arctic, the Faroe Islands have many political, economic and social challenges and opportunities common with the other circumpolar countries and communities. These shared interests provide an excellent basis for an international research cooperation in our region. And such operation is not only necessary but absolutely vital. The location of the Faroe Islands has long since been recognized as globally important for observing and modeling the effect of the climate change. This is where the cold water from the high Arctic convert with the warm currency of the Gulf Stream. We are pleased to provide our own scientific expertise in the international research and monitoring efforts related to the oceans and the climate change. I am confident that many other aspects, some uniquely Faroese, other common to all people and nations in the Arctic, will also become a subject in the future studies and research, both in the Arctic and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Finland.
Dear Secretary of State, dear Arctic colleagues and permanent participants, ladies and gentlemen, I first visited Alaska as a foreign minister almost 2 years ago when I attended the Glacier Conference in Anchorage. We felt very welcome in Alaska. We had the spectacular view of Denali, the highest mountain of US. The United States and Finland decided to intensify the cooperation between the chairmanships in order to ensure continuity. I will come back on the chairmanship program later today. The Arctic is becoming increasingly important for governments, businesses and non-governmental organizations. The reason is simple. We recognize that the global warming is the main driver of change in the Arctic. The challenges of melting sea ice, thawing permafrost and changes in our ecosystems are complex. They cannot be solved one by one or in isolation. The Arctic region is connected with other sea areas and continents. The changes affecting the Arctic are reflected elsewhere. Our ability to understand, predict and respond to the changes is crucial for the future to the Arctic. Global warming is expected to continue for decades, and we should understand the effects and act with determination. The Paris Climate Agreement is the cornerstone for mitigating climate change. The UN Agenda 2030 provides a toolbox for promoting and achieving sustainable development. Both are important for the future of the Arctic. Predictability in climate work is important for both governments and businesses. Investing in low-carbon clean technologies simply makes sense. In the past 20 years, the Arctic Council has evolved in the main forum for Arctic issues. The Arctic Council has promoted common Arctic interests worthwhile. It is my wish that we will continue to work together to foster prosperity and sustainability of the Arctic people and environment. The scope of the Council's work has grown wider during the recent years. Cross-cutting themes such as climate, energy, resilience, and the seas has filled up the agenda. The number of projects and programs are close to 100. The work of the Arctic Council would benefit from a longer-term strategic plan. Then the Council could decide what to focus in the coming years. Dear colleagues, I would like to commend the US chairmanship for its leadership during these past 2 years. It has not been an easy task. The international situation has put its mark on relations between countries, but it has not affected Arctic cooperation, and I think it should not. It gives me a great pleasure that we today signed the agreement on enhancing international Arctic scientific cooperation. This is the third legally binding agreement negotiated under the auspices of the Arctic Council. I am pleased that also the Ministerial was able to agree a declaration. The declaration addresses ocean stewardship, living and economic conditions, and the impacts of the climate change, and is a most welcome sign of our will to cooperate. Finally, I would like to thank all Arctic states, permanent participants and observers for the cooperation, and the Arctic Council Secretariat for its outstanding work. Thank you.
Thank you. Now call for the statement of Iceland.
Thank you. Distinguished ministers, permanent participants, other members of the Arctic Council and observers. It is a privilege to visit Fairbanks and experience Alaska firsthand as we conclude the US chairmanship. Mr. Chair, we can proudly rejoice over our achievements here today. The US chairmanship program has focused on work to protect the marine environment, conserve Arctic biodiversity, improve conditions in the Arctic communities, and address the rapidly changing climate in the Arctic. Clearly, all these issues are crucial for the people of the Arctic. The Paris Agreement was a landmark achievement that Iceland is proud to be a party to. We are also determined to maintain that ambitions when it comes to implementation. So much is at stake, especially for the Arctic states. The Arctic is a priority in Icelandic's foreign policy, and it matters a lot to the Icelandic people who in entirety live in the Arctic region. In particular, we emphasize close cooperation with all stakeholders, including the indigenous peoples and the observers. Iceland has participated actively in the work of the Council during the US chairmanship. For instance, we co-led the Task Force on Arctic Marine Cooperation. It has been increasingly evident that climate change is impacting the marine ecosystem, and for a country like Iceland, which bases its livelihood on the resources of the oceans, this development is of great concern. Mr. Chair, the 8 Arctic states all share a common responsibility in the protection and sustainability of the Arctic. In our effort to live up to this responsibility, our work has included environmental protection, sustainable economic development and utilization of natural resources, security and safety, infrastructure and connectivity. It is safe to say that the theme of the Finnish chairmanship captures well these diverse issues. In 2 years' time, Iceland follows in Finland's footsteps and takes over the chairmanships. Our preparations have already begun, and we look forward to shouldering this responsibility, which we take very seriously. Dear colleagues, I would like to commend the United States government at the conclusion of the chairmanship. The engagement and effort the United States has put into the chairmanship programme has been instrumental in focusing international attention on the Arctic, and in particular on the Arctic Council and its important work. Let me conclude by wishing the incoming chair, Minister Soini, and his team all the best during Finland's chairmanship. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the Inuit International Association.
Ministers, distinguished guests, colleagues and friends, on behalf of everyone at Inuit International Association, I would like to thank the United States for a very productive chairmanship of the Arctic Council. While there are many people in the U.S. chairmanship team and the Arctic Council Secretariat who have worked hard to make the last 2 years a success, we'd like to give special thanks to Ambassador David Bolton for his inspired leadership as the chief of the senior Arctic officials. What the Ottawa Declaration established in 1996 was truly unique, not because the Arctic Council includes all of the Arctic states, or that it was established working groups, or because it provides a means for observers to participate. The Arctic Council is unique because it includes the voices of the indigenous peoples of the Arctic, sitting at the same tables as the Arctic states. It is a special relationship between the Arctic states and the permanent participants that it is the heart of the Arctic Council, and without the full and meaningful and participation of us indigenous peoples of the Arctic, the Council would just be another intergovernmental forum. For AIA to make a substantial contribution to the work of the Council requires support, and in our view, this should come from 3 types of sources. First, support from our relationship with the Arctic Council, in which our constituents reside, necessary and important. It shows that the Arctic states value our contributions, something which has been proven time and time again. Second, we must support from the communities and organizations in our region. This shows that the people we respect know our work benefits for them at home. Third, there should be an avenue for entities outside the Arctic, but the Arctic interests, to support us in this is where the Algu Fund, which was officially opened yesterday, comes in. I urge the Arctic Council observers and other Arctic interests to look closely at it. Now more than ever, the work of the Arctic Council is vitally important to the Aleut people of the United States and the Russian Federation. Their well-being has been tied to the marine environment for millennia. Safe shipping, healthy biodiversity, freedom from pollution, and understanding of what to expect from the changing climate are essential for the continuation of the Aleut way of life. We, the Aleut people, are resilient and adaptable. We have survived many hardships brought about by contact with the outside world, but despite our strength, the challenges facing the Aleuts are indeed, and all the indigenous peoples of the Arctic, are more varied than ever before. Ocean acidification and species migration due to warming temperatures threaten our ability to harvest salmon. Sea level rises, jeopardizing our coastal communities, and extreme weather events are making our waters increasingly dangerous to navigate. All of these things are real, and they are happening right now. The data on the causes are irrefutable, and we cannot let politics interfere with the actions that must happen now and in the future. We are small, remote communities, and while we are adaptable and resilient, we cannot slow, much less stop these changes. We urge not only the Arctic states, but all the nations to rapidly achieve the long-term temperature goal in the Paris Climate Agreement and to work to implement with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal by 2030. Now, Vera Belarova, an AIA board member for the community of Nikolskoye and the Commander Islands of the Russian Federation, will conclude our statement.
Здравствуйте.
Greetings. I addressed the participants of the ministerial session in Salikhard first time when we summarized the activity of the Russian Federation. It is a huge honor for me to be here today and speak before you. The Arctic peoples have a long time history, but must provide a lot of efforts to support the balance. The prerequisite for that is clean and healthy environment. We are sure that the Arctic Council is one of the best known ways to cooperate between the Arctic states and the indigenous people to obtain that balance. The majority of indigenous peoples of Arctic come from Russia. Therefore, I would like to ask to attend to their interests, to especially attend to their interests when working in the Arctic Council. I believe that together with our friends from the Circumpolar Inuit Council and the Association of the Northern Peoples of the Russian Federation, we can make the voices of the indigenous peoples of Russia sound louder and work for the common benefit. And finally, the representatives of the Aleuts of the Russian Federation would like to thank our government for the steps taken to improve the monitoring of the Arctic environment and the research mechanisms providing for the ecological safety, the preservation of the biological diversity, and the risks of the oil spills and all other measures taken to protect the environment today and in the future. We stand ready to cooperate with the Finnish team to provide for effective work over the next 2 years. We thank everyone, including the residents of the Fairbanks, for their hospitality.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the Arctic Athabascan Council.
Erasmus Kawocho Nation. Thickade Nizi Donton. Masi. My name is Bill Erasmus, and I'm the International Chair for the Arctic Athabascan Council. We're very pleased to be here. We want to thank the host people who did the cultural activities this morning, and remind the Chair that we are indeed comfortable in a hockey arena, so thank you. I have some prepared notes, so I'll read them into the record. Our members of the Arctic Athabascan Council are in Alaska and Canada, and with me I want to invite and also welcome Chief Gary Harrison, Chief Michael Stickman, Chief P.J. Simon, Faye Ewan, and Bridget LaRocque. And we only have a couple of minutes, so we'll get straight into the two important issues that are before us, which are climate change and economic stability. And I'll end with a few comments about the Arctic Athabascan Council. A key Arctic Council achievement kicking off the U.S. chairmanship was a framework for action on enhanced black carbon and methane emissions reductions. This voluntary agreement marked the first time that Arctic states formally agreed to work together to mitigate climate change and aims to exchange best practices and enhance regional action to reduce emissions. The report of the first expert group on black carbon and methane that was adopted today offers recommendations on concrete measures to implement the framework and reduce emissions from key sectors like diesel and oil and gas, venting and flaring. Indigenous people of the North are counting on actions by the leaders around the table today to take those recommendations forward. You are sending a strong, important political message that climate change mitigation can be organized regionally as well as globally. The Finnish chair has a great opportunity and responsibility during a chairmanship to promote effective implementation of the framework agreement. In order to ensure health and well-being in the Arctic, we must balance environmental protection with economic stability. With this in mind, we applaud the incoming Finnish chairmanship and work plan, which includes cooperation on education, meteorological cooperation, telecommunications, and environmental protection. The Arctic Athabascan Council will strive to contribute meaningful into these processes The Arctic Athabascan Council looks forward to engaging in the Arctic Environmental Impact Assessment, Arctic Energy Summit, and Teachers' Education for Diversity and Equality in the Arctic. Please let us remind you that the culture of Athabascan peoples reflected in the land and all that it gives. We are connected to the land. It is who we are. Climate change in the Arctic is not just an environmental issue. It is a matter of culture and our rights to exist as Indigenous peoples. Please let us work collectively to find the way forward and the right balance. Our final word, Mr. Chairman. This ministerial meeting marks one full circle for the Arctic Athabascan Council's involvement within the Arctic Council family. It's been 16 years since we were welcomed into the Arctic Council. In that time, we have collaborated a great deal with Arctic states and permanent participants regarding circumpolar relations and geopolitics in general. We're all very much connected. Let us respect each other and continue our international cooperation to protect our Arctic for future generations. Masicho.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the Gwich'in Council International.
Ministers, designated guests, colleagues, and friends, on behalf of Gwich'in Council International, I would like to welcome you to our traditional territory, which is just to the north of where we sit. Fairbanks has traditionally been a meeting of different Dene peoples, and we are honored that it is able to play this role for the Arctic Council as we celebrate its 20th anniversary. Thank you also to Chief Trimble Gilbert, a member of our nation, for the words of welcome, and to the drummers and singers for showing everyone that our culture is very much alive. Leaders among the Gwich'in Nation serve in many capacities on our tribal councils, in our village corporations, and as leaders of our land claims organizations. We are intimately aware of the need for social and economic development in our communities and with our associated challenges. We must have the right to determine our own balance between safeguarding the Arctic environment and our participation in the modern resource economy. The balance between jobs and the environment is one that is always at the forefront of our communities. However, we strongly believe that without significant, sustained, and coordinated approaches to addressing the causes of the warming Arctic climate, our culture, linked so closely to the porcupine caribou herd, cannot survive. The Arctic environment has sustained Gwich'in since time immemorial, and now Gwich'in must use new ways to stand up and protect it so it can continue to sustain future generations. It is for this reason that Gwich'in need the Arctic Council to continue to show leadership, not only through the groundbreaking projects of the working groups, but at the highest political levels as well. We appreciate the support of those around the table who continue to be allies with us, not only through their efforts to address climate change, both within and outside the Arctic, but also in the advancement of our Indigenous rights. We look forward to working with the incoming Finnish chairmanship over the next 2 years, and in particular, welcome their initiative on best practices in environmental impact assessment. EIAs are an important tool for evaluating this balance that needs to be struck between protecting the environment and facilitating economic development. Masi.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to the Inuit Circumpolar Council.
Good morning, ministers, ambassadors, distinguished guests, and friends. The Minister of Canada, we still have Ottawa. Go Seds go. It's a pleasure to meet here in beautiful Fairbanks on the traditional lands of the Tainana people and I want to recognize this and thank them for their welcome and their hospitality. I speak to you today in my capacity as the International Chair of the Inuit Circumpolar Council. I represent 160,000 Inuit from over 100 communities and villages throughout Chukotka, Alaska, Canada, Greenland. One people, one Arctic, and 4 countries with land that spans more than 5 million square kilometers. Last year, the Arctic Council celebrated 20 years. This year, the Inuit Circumpolar Council celebrates 40 years. As others look north, as Inuit and Arctic peoples look from the north, we have an opportunity today to take a moment to observe and reflect. We have done a great deal in the last 20 or 40 years. Think of what we can accomplish in the next 40 to 50 years. The United States has worked hard to advance the Arctic Council, and we celebrate the success of their chairmanship. I believe the U.S. has made progress by supporting the peoples of the Arctic and supporting effective policy development during their chairmanship. This is an ongoing evolution. Each chairmanship moves the target forward as they bring new vision and life to the Council. This is healthy. This allows for renewal. The role of the Council in promoting sustainable development through integration and harmonization of economic development, social development, and environmental protection has been an important pillar. To this end, reports and policy recommendations on food security, culture, mental wellness, and suicide prevention. And here I'd like to thank the Chair and the Canadian Minister for highlighting the work of the Rising Sun. That's a very important initiative for the Inuit community. And on access to safe water and sewer are welcomed and will help with policy making. A credit to the U.S. chairmanship. We value U.S. efforts, including work on heavy fuel oil, ocean acidification, and the engagement of Indigenous peoples in discussions on marine protected areas. We look forward to continued implementation of the Arctic Marine Shipping Assessment and further work of the Task Force on Arctic Marine Cooperation. I must note that the results of all the work done during the U.S. chairmanship would have benefited greatly from an earlier involvement of the permanent participants during project planning stages and through the use of Indigenous knowledge. Using Indigenous knowledge and science together ensures a more complete and improved result in the work of the Council. We urge the Arctic states to continue and expand on the meaningful engagement with the permanent participants in the ongoing work of the Council, to continue to build upon this partnership and move the benchmark up. I also want to signal to the incoming Finnish chair that you can count on ICC to support your chairmanship program. We applaud the establishment of the Task Force on Improved Connectivity in the Arctic. The Arctic requires this to be able to truly walk in the 21st century. ICC supports Finland's effort to improve Arctic community access to clean, affordable, and renewable energy sources, recognizing the potential to further reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to enhance energy efficiency and conservation, and to reduce emissions of black carbon from energy production in the region. The importance of education in fostering sustainable development in Arctic communities cannot be overstated. It is time to move forward on this to close the gap between southern and Arctic communities. We need innovative models and equal access to high and higher quality education at all levels, from early childhood to post-secondary. ICC applauds the Finnish chairmanship for prioritizing the importance of implementing the Paris Agreement on climate change and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. In closing, let's celebrate the Arctic Council and its accomplishments together. Let's have the courage to make it even better. Build upon the support of the meaningful and equitable partnerships of the permanent participants at all working groups. building upon the support and encouraging the co-production of knowledge, by truly acknowledging, recognizing, respecting, and integrating each other's worldviews and values, our collective achievement will be enhanced for the benefit of the Arctic indigenous peoples, the Arctic states, and the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Russian Association of Indigenous Peoples of the North.
Esteemed ministers, brothers, sisters, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, RIPON's President Grigory Letkov regrets that he was unable to attend this event today. He sends his best wishes and hopes that the ministerial meetings will be successful. My name is Vladimir Klimov. I am an ethnic Mansi born in the Tyumen Oblast, north of the Tyumen Oblast of the Russian Federation. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak before you. I would like to specifically thank the U.S. chairmanship team and the government of Finland for your support of RIPON's participation in the work of this important forum. I congratulate you, Mr. Chairman, on the successful U.S. chairmanship and express my gratitude to all those who have been involved in this diligent and productive work over the last 2 years. The Russian Association of Indigenous Peoples of the North represents 35 territorial and ethnic organizations of 41 indigenous people. We are a unique example of cooperation of peoples, original cultures, variety of languages and types of traditional economic activities, still largely based on our natural resources. Through our organizations and institutions, we can work in close cooperation with the government of Russia while securing our independence and the ability to stand for what we believe is right in regards of multiple issues of interest for our people and their rights. Despite financial constraints, RIPON is still actively participating in the work of the Arctic Council. When I started working for the Arctic Council, I heard many stories of the achievements of the Arctic Council's participants in their fight for the environment, sustainable development of the Arctic, preservation of traditional knowledge and indigenous communities. We're hopeful that under the Finnish chairmanship, this spirit of cooperation will reoccur, like during the times of Rovaniemi process when Finland took a critically important stand and by doing so facilitated the advancement of common interests and joint actions. One of the long-term goals of RIPON is to make sure that our children and the new generation of leaders have a profound understanding of the Arctic, its history and challenges, so as to set high standards for sustainable development, healthy communities and environment, and to help preserve and conduct the traditional lifestyle and economics. RIPON hopes that more research will be conducted on how to make small communities more economically stable. We want to improve the quality of education for the children of the nomadic reindeer herdsmen of the North, and it is to this purpose that RIPON launched the Children of the Arctic project under the auspices of the Arctic Council's Working Group on Sustainable Development. Year after year, our association has conducted a forum for young people, training, seminars, and other events. We actively implement information policy for the indigenous people who published a magazine called The World of Indigenous Peoples Living Arctic. In order to expand our economic and business activities, the Business Council has been established within RIPON. RIPON is also actively collaborating with the International Organization of Indigenous People. In March of this year, RIPON was glad to greet representatives of the Sami Council, Indigenous People, and Association of the World's Reindeer Herdsmen at the International Forum and the 8th meeting of RIPON in the city of Salikard in the Russian Federation. In the end of April, one of the phases of the AALU project took place as part of the 7th International Expo Treasures of the North in Moscow. In conclusion, I would like to mention that RIPON highly values the work of the Arctic Council in connection with the effects of black carbon on the health of the indigenous population of the Arctic and welcomes the expansion of the circumpolar network of local monitoring of the environment. We hope that the Arctic Council will continue to work in cooperation with the indigenous communities so that they can adapt both to the changing environment and the future economic opportunities. Thank you for your attention.
I now give the floor to Sami Council.
Mr. Chair, ministers, indigenous leaders, observers, friends of the Arctic. For more than 20 years, the Arctic Council has gathered the Arctic states and indigenous peoples organizations, joined by a steadily increasing group of observers to 2, cooperation on sustainable development and environmental protection in the Arctic. What is it that binds this diverse group of actors together? What is it that keeps us going for more than 20 years? What makes us claim the Arctic to remain a region of peace and stability in declaration after declaration and stick to it? Mr. Chair, I like to believe that the value we all share is to maintain healthy and productive environment in the Arctic that will sustain our lives today and for generations to come. For us, the Arctic is our home. It is where we live our lives, develop our economies of reindeer herding, fishing, hunting, gathering. We hold unique knowledge about these lands. Some value the Arctic as a knowledge base where to conduct groundbreaking research. Some want to come to Arctic to experience harsh climate, light and beauty. Some look to develop technology to extract resources in a best possible way. To protect the fragile environment and promote sustainable development in the Arctic are still the value that binds us together in the Arctic Cooperation. For more than 20 years, this value foundation has not changed. Only more people has come to share those values. What changes are the policies. If our shared values are put at risk, the policies need to change, not the values. That is what the Arctic Council should do. Develop policies to secure our core values in the Arctic. In doing so, Mr. Chair, the Summit Council urges everyone to put Mother Nature first. In conclusion, the Summit Council would like to thank the United States for their very able chairmanship during the past 2 years. It has been a true pleasure to work with the team. We look forward to the Finnish chairmanship and to a close cooperation with Finland and on their themes. And finally, we look forward to welcoming the Arctic Council to Sápmi again. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Norway.
Thank you. Friends of the Arctic, first, thank you to Secretary Tillerson and his team for your hospitality and hard work. Under the U.S. chairmanship, the Arctic Council has grown stronger and more effective. In the Arctic, we have found ways of working together based on common interest and also based on the respect for international law. The result is that the Arctic today is an area based on peace and stability. And for Norway, our #1 priority is to make sure that it stays this way. I think we also, during quite volatile times, have seen that we have been able to do so. Only when we use the vast resources and protect its fragile environment, this is possible also in the future. Faced with the rapid changes and the many opportunities in the Arctic, we need even stronger regional cooperation. There is a great interest for the Arctic, not only from the Arctic states, but also from key other actors. Arctic resources must be managed based on best available knowledge. And we must strike a sound balance between economic activity and environmental protection, including climate change. And as my colleague from Canada underlined, in Norway, 10% of our population lives above the polar circle, is growing faster, and we have lower unemployment in this region of our country than the rest. Then we also need to develop further in the years to come. Most important, we must ensure that change and opportunity does not become sources of tension and conflict. And we should not be complacent about this. That it has gone well so far is no guarantee for the future. That's why it's important that we meet like this, all the Arctic nations. Over the next years, we will be working very closely with Finland. We know that the chairmanship is in the best hands with Timo and his team, and also having a strategy for even enhancing the regional integration. Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to give the floor to the President of the Sami Parliament, Mrs. Vibeke Larsen.
Chair of the Arctic Council, Ministers, Permanent Participant, Leaders, Excellencies, Brothers and Sisters. Sami livelihoods or industries have traditionally been closely related to nature. We see today that our culture will be affected not only by climate change, but also by impacts of measures taken in response to it. It is essential to ensure that any decisions regarding climate change action benefit rather than harm indigenous people. Mr. Chair, the cultural heritage sites of the indigenous people of the Arctic are important for self-definition and belonging. They tie the past to the present and they unify culture and nature. They form basis for cultural and creative industries, for art and tourism. It is important that the indigenous peoples have the role as the main guardians of our cultural heritage. In Norway, the Sami Parliament has achieved some authority in this respect. This has enabled us to take an active role, for instance, with regard to defining and promoting a site for the World Heritage List. In light of the current threats to the indigenous people, to the indigenous Arctic heritage sites, including thawing, shoreline erosion and increasing access, it is important that the Arctic Council include concern for indigenous heritage in the future work. Ologito, thank you all.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Your Excellency, Mr. Governor, dear colleagues. I would like to thank our American hosts for their hospitality and congratulate them on the effective chairmanship of the Arctic Council. Russia has been doing and will continue doing a lot to ensure that the Arctic develops as a territory of peace, stability and cooperation. There is no conflict potential in the region. International law secures in our common region national interests of all the Arctic states that bear special responsibility for the long-term development of the far north. By the way, yesterday in the evening, with participants of 4 ministers, certain colleagues raised the issues of security in the Arctic region. In this context, let me recall that our countries have special mechanisms, used to have a special mechanism until 2013, which is the meeting of chairs of General Staff Forces of the Arctic states. These meetings were extremely useful in terms of building trust, mutual understanding. Unfortunately, this is the 4th year in a row that this meeting hadn't been conducted, and it was not the initiative of our country. As the largest Arctic state, we will continue facilitating efforts to enhance the region's resilience to global challenges and implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development endorsed by the UN General Assembly. It is clear that environmental protection activities in the Arctic imply taking joint preventive measures, and here we need to develop resource base. In this context, I would like to emphasize the role of the Arctic Council Project Support Instrument, which makes it possible to introduce new technological solutions and carry out environmental initiatives, including those aimed at reducing black carbon emissions and eliminating cumulative industrial waste. While the Arctic is no longer a terra incognita, this region is still among the least explored ones. The Intergovernmental Agreement on Enhancing International Arctic Scientific Cooperation that we have signed today will give additional impetus to joint research of our scientists from all our countries. Our priorities include the extension of mutually beneficial economic ties. We welcome the launch of cooperation in telecommunications in the Arctic Council. By this example, we suggest that the activities of the Arctic Economic Council are intensified and encourage Finland's upcoming chairmanship to develop specific proposals in this regard, taking into account the views of all the participants of the Arctic Council. We invite our partners to cooperate on the implementation of Russia's Arctic Development Program, along with environmental protection efforts and measures to improve the living standards of the indigenous peoples of the North, as well as support their culture and traditions. I would like to wish good luck to Finland at the helm of our council. We will do our best to support our Finnish colleagues in ensuring the efficient work of the 8 Arctic states. I promise to take measures that will promote the more comfortable environment of participation of indigenous peoples in the work of the Arctic Council.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Sweden.
Thank you, dear Arctic friends. Thank you for bringing us back to Alaska. I come from the north of Sweden, where you're supposed to be modest, so we call this unnecessarily beautiful. And I would like to first of all thank Secretary Tillerson and also the host committee for the warm hospitality, and also congratulate you on your successful chairmanship. We are 8 ministers of foreign affairs around this table, and we know that there are so many parts of the world that are marred with violence and conflicts. And in this situation, the Arctic is, as you heard my dear Norwegian colleagues say, the Arctic is characterized by peace, stability, low tension, and cooperation based on respect for international law. So let's keep it that way. But the Arctic is today also about challenges, as we've heard around this table from all of you. And I wonder about what the planet would say if she had a seat at the table. Perhaps she would remind us how the Arctic functions as our cooling system. Perhaps she would admit as being as concerned as the scientific community, as worried as the local and indigenous communities who live on the life support system that it offers. And this deep concern might stem from the fact that things are changing so fast now. Only 2 decades from now, the Arctic Ocean could be largely free of sea ice. Perhaps our planet would say, I've been your best friend since the Industrial Revolution. I've done everything I can to dampen and absorb. I have tried to keep Greenland and the permafrost in Siberia intact, and I have sent you no invoices. But it is about to change. Perhaps our planet would quote our own reports. Arctic warming could have a cumulative net cost of $90 trillion at the end of this century. So, dear friends, the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement provide a science-based path away from these risks and towards equality and sustainability. Like no other generation before us, we have the knowledge, technology, the money, and the capacity to save our planet. It's a win-win, as the business community already knows. Investment in green solutions creates new jobs. Sustainability has become a business case. And in the longer term, the low-carbon growth story is the only growth story on offer. And I think we can serve as an example, the Swedish example. Since 1990, we have reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 23%. And meanwhile, our GDP has grown by 58%. And my government has set the next target. Sweden will be carbon neutral by 2045. Our common goal around this table and in the Arctic Council requires a joint priority, political will, and process of new scientific research, business innovation, and many determined steps towards a sustainable future. Timo, the Arctic Council, we think, will be in safe hands with Finland as chair. And you know that if we want a sustainable future, we need a stable Arctic. And with my grandchildren in mind, I would say, let's go for it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the United States.
Thank you. As Secretary Tillerson already expressed, the United States is delighted to be hosting this ministerial meeting at the conclusion of our chairmanship. We are especially gratified to be hosting in Fairbanks, Alaska. The United States is committed to the Arctic region. We place great value on the Arctic's environmental, economic, and cultural significance, and are well aware of the challenges the region faces. Our nations created the Arctic Council 20 years ago, with a primary focus on sustainable development and environmental protection. We have seen the Arctic Council grow in stature and in reach. We regard the Arctic Council as the body for addressing circumpolar issues and for facilitating collaboration among Arctic nations and peoples. Today, we acknowledge the impressive work that has been done by the Arctic Council and look to its future. Secretary Tillerson and other delegates around the table have already noted the Arctic Council's many accomplishments of the past 2 years, including the signing this morning of the new agreement on Arctic scientific cooperation. I also wish to acknowledge the engagement of the many Arctic Council observers who helped make this possible. During our chairmanship, we found new ways to include observers in this work, for example, reporting emissions of black carbon and linking efforts on migratory bird conservation. I also note that the number of observers is growing with our decision to admit 7 new observers to the Arctic Council. As we look to the future, we wish to continue to strengthen the Arctic Council as an institution. We are pleased that the Council has committed to develop its first ever long-term strategic plan, a step that will help set priorities and direction. We look forward to participating in this valuable exercise. I'd also note we owe success in the Arctic Council in great measure to the permanent participants, who provide a vital and authentic contribution to all that we do. We recognize that the permanent participants face challenges of various kinds in engaging in the burgeoning work of the Council. Let us renew our commitment to work with them in meeting these challenges. With Finland poised to take on the mantle of the Arctic Council's leadership, the future of the Council looks bright indeed. We stand ready to support Finland's chairmanship. Through our partnership with Alaska, the United States will remain deeply committed to the Arctic regional stability and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all of you for your thoughtful statements and constructive input to all of the members of this council this morning. It is greatly appreciated. I now invite Minister Soini to present the program for the Finnish chairmanship during the next biennium.
Thank you very much, dear all. Thank you for this opportunity to present Finland's chairmanship program of the Arctic Council and to share with you some thoughts on how we all could take Arctic cooperation forward. We must take a hard look at the future. In many ways, we are standing at the crossroads. These are crucial choices to be made. International tensions are running high. So far, these tensions have not affected Arctic cooperation. It is my sincere hope that we all work to keep it that way. The Arctic will not remain what it once was or what it is now. Climate change will fundamentally change the Arctic region in the coming decades. Global warming will open up new parts of the Arctic, and human activity in the region will increase. Globalization will reach the Arctic. It is not so distant future. The region may become a hub for commercial activities. Arctic resources may attract worldwide interest, and globally significant transport routes may be created. Now it's the time to think what kind of Arctic we want in the future. We should make sure that all human activity is sustainable. Increasing opportunities should benefit the people who already live in the Arctic region, and certainly also the indigenous communities. We should develop appropriate stewardship based on international law to govern activities in the Arctic. The Arctic countries should effectively contribute to the global efforts to mitigate climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, when preparing for the chairmanship, Finland has very useful discussions with the United States and the other Arctic states and the participating indigenous peoples' organizations. I wish to thank all of you sincerely for your support and your suggestions for the chairmanship program. In our opinion, two broad frameworks should be taken into account in all Arctic Council activities. They are climate change, especially the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations adopted 2 years ago. Finland has identified 4 priority areas of Arctic cooperation that we believe deserve particular attention. They are environmental protection, connectivity, meteorological cooperation and education. Environmental protection includes many climate-related issues. Finland would also like to take forward to work to safeguard biodiversity, slow down the acidification of the oceans, to curb the emissions of the black carbon and methane, and to reduce marine litter. Connectivity or telecommunications in the Arctic is an initiative launched by the United States. Better connectivity is a lifeline for all human activities. We should speed up identifying solutions that are best suited for the Arctic and work together with the Arctic Economic Council. Meteorological cooperation is vital for the study of changing conditions in the Arctic. We need a strong network of stakeholders providing weather, climate, ice and sea monitoring in the region. We hope that all the Arctic Council working groups will benefit from close cooperation with the World Meteorological Organization. Providing good basic education to all children in the Arctic is the first step to help them learn a trade in the changing circumstances or to receive higher education. We should make full use of the technical means to cope with the challenges of long distances and minority languages. Here we want to cooperate closely with the University of the Arctic Network of Teachers and Educators. When thinking of the future, we should be prepared to strengthen Arctic cooperation and ensure its political support in our countries. Finland is ready to host an Arctic Summit meeting, provided that the international situation is favourable and that we can agree on an agenda which is appropriate for the summit. Ladies and gentlemen, on my behalf, I welcome the new observers invited today to join in the work of the Arctic Council. Finland recognizes the important role of the observer states and organizations in the activities of the Arctic Council. We want to continue the good practices of the US chairmanship to work for a stronger involvement of the observers. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, dear Arctic colleagues, exploring common solutions is the slogan that Finland will use during our chairmanship. I look forward to cooperating with all of you to find common solutions and put them into practice. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, let me express my thanks to all of the delegates and those who are supporting the delegations for making the trip to come to Fairbanks. I know many of you traveled a great distance, to be here, but I think your presence and that effort put forth sends a very strong message as to your interest and your commitment to continuing our efforts to jointly address the daunting challenges that confront us in the Arctic, but also the exciting prospects and opportunities. And I know that in terms of with the theme that Finland has chosen, global solutions, those solutions reside in the minds of people around this table and those that we know back in our home countries and our organizations. And we look forward to seeing those solutions brought forward in future sessions of the Arctic Council. So my final act would be to ask my friend and colleague, Foreign Minister Stheni, to join me on the dais so I can pass this most beautiful gavel, which is in and of itself a work of art, to him in his new role as chairman. If you please join me.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated.
It is very impressive. So I'm going to wield it one last time and adjourn the meeting as I pass the gavel to my friend. We're adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Shall I take this with me?
Yes.